everyone, welcome to another video. In this video we're going to talk about our suspension, so our shock absorbers or dampers. And what you can see here are the shocks that I took out of my car. So this is a rear one, this is a front one. And as you can see, they're in really bad condition. So they're completely rusted and they're really past their prime. I do believe that these are the original shocks that my car came with. So we'll take a look at both of these. We'll start off by taking a look at the rear shock. So you can see this is an all steel shock. It's quite rusty. On either end there are metallastic bushes, so rubber bushes on either end, and this shock has an open length of about 45 centimeters, which is quite long, and this spring has a spring rate of 72 pounds-inch, so it's quite a soft spring. These cars in the 60s were quite softly sprung because it required quite a lot of roll to get a lot of grip on there. It's not advisable to try to repaint these because the inner workings have suffered and they will not work as they should. So I made a list with all the specifications that this shock had. So length, spring rate, size of the bushings on either end, and then I put this to the side and did the same on the front one. So we're going to take a look at the front shock. So you can see this is a lot shorter, again all steel construction. This one has a stud for the mounting of the answer roll bar. It's at a 45-degree angle. The bushes are out of this one, but the same, this would have rubber bushes. You can see that this is a spring with a lot of coils. This one has a spring rate of 100 pounds-inch, so it's a little bit stiffer than the rear one. These shocks were good in periods. These are a twin tube style shock absorber, and there's a little bit of difference in how these work, but I'll explain this later. So you can see that these are in definite need of replacing, and you have quite a lot of options if you want to go and change shock absorbers. So you have off-the-shelf options from Evo, Specs, Gas and Protec, and these are just standard replacements that you can bolt on and they will work just fine, and they're not that expensive. I think you will pay around 500 euros or 500 pounds for a set of springs and dampers on either of those brands. So they're all about the same. They're all a twin tube style shock absorber, and what that means is that on the inside of the shock body there's a separate tube which is filled with fluid, with oil, that will be displaced when the shock is working. And it's a good design, but as you can see it's the same design as this, so it has been around for quite a while. It's not the same design that is being used on the really high-tech and high-end coilovers that we see in modern cars or modern race cars, in modern performance cars. Those are monotube designs, the newest, and I really have thought about what I wanted to replace these with, because a Lotus is known for its handling, so I really didn't want to skimp out on new shocks, because I'm investing so much time and energy and money into the complete restoration of the car. I didn't want to skimp on the shocks. So in the end I had to decide between two things what I wanted, and both were custom options, so I wouldn't go with any of the off-the-shelf options. So either I would go with Protex, which is a twin tube shock from ProComp. So ProComp is a shock absorber company which use Protec shocks, but they completely disassembled. They design their damper curves and springs on the design of your car. So they will work with you to see what your spring rates should be, and they design the shock to work with that spring. And the Protects aren't that expensive. As I said, even the custom options are around 500 euros, maybe a little bit more, but not too much. So that is quite a good option. However, I decided to really go all out, and I talked to Simon at Meteor Motorsports, so Race Shocks UK, and we talked a bit about all the options that I had, and in the end I was debating either going with Nitron shocks or with Quantums, and Simon pointed me towards the Nitrons, which is actually their cheapest option. So I was quite happy with that. So we'll take a look at Nitrons to see what the difference is between these. Now that we've taken a look at what the original shocks are, we're going to take a look at the thing that we're going to replace them with. And I've put a lot of thought in what we need to do to replace these, because there are quite a lot of off-the-shelf options. But I do think that those off-the-shelf options don't fully utilize the potential that Europa has, because it's renowned for its incredible handling, and I didn't want to replace it with a subpar solution. So we'll take a look at what I bought and how I came to that conclusion. So we'll do a little unboxing together. So this is the box where the Nitrons came in. They're completely custom designed, so it's all custom lengths, custom spring rates, custom damping curves, and these are quite expensive. So one of these shocks costs as much as a whole set of the twin tubes from Evo, Protec, Specs. But these are a monotube design. So we'll have a piece of settings and a user manual, and we have the front shocks. And as you can see, they look really nice. So this is all aluminium, but does have a steel spring, of course. These have the same length on open and closed as the originals. They have an adjustable spring perch, so I can adjust the preload or loosen these and change the ride height a little bit. These are single adjustable, so I think there are 22 clicks that we can adjust, so these can be adjusted on the car. So they adjust both bump and rebound on a single adjuster. They are a lot lighter than the originals. On the fronts it's about a kilogram lighter per shock. You can see that there are a lot less coils on this spring than on the other spring, and we went for a 150 pounds-inch spring on the front, which is a little bit more than the original, which was 100. But the way that we came to these spring rates is we took all of the measurements of all our suspension pickup points, our wishbone lengths, our ride heights, our overall vehicle weight and our weight distribution, and we calculated what our ride frequencies would be. In the end we went with a ride frequency of 1.7 on the front, which was with a 150 pounds spring. In the package there is also an adjuster for adjusting the spring perches. This is included. So this is a rear shock. Again, these have the same open and closed lengths as the original shock would have, but steel springs, all aluminium shock absorber, again with an adjuster on the top, single adjustable on both coil and rebound. All of the ends have spherical bearings, so no rubber bushes but spherical bearings, and the ends have been machined to the width that we need. You can see that on this shock we have two springs. So there's a main spring and a progressive spring. The main spring also has a spring rate of 150 pounds-inch, and this is a special progressive spring. And what that does is this makes that we can have a little bit softer rear spring, but when it compresses, the spring rate rises. So even though that the main spring is 150 pounds, the combination of both, it ranges between 87 and 130 pounds. And again, we calculated all of the ride frequencies, and we have 1.57, so about 1.6 ride frequency in the rear. And you can see that we have a little bit of a difference, so the front ride frequency is a little bit higher than the rear. We want a little bit of difference between both because of the way it will go over bumps, so we need about 10% difference. And I've just trusted Simon on this because he sets up race cars for a living, and that's what he finds that that works best. We talked about all of the different spring rates that are being used by most Europa owners, and we found that they were quite high. So having a front spring rate of about 240 pounds isn't that special on Europa. So we are going actually quite softly sprung, but our dampers will do a lot more work than on a twin tube design. So these are all monotube dampers. You can see that the body on the damper is really wide, and instead of on a twin tube, which has an internal construction with a smaller piston, the piston size of this monotube damper is really as big as the body. So there's a lot more fluid that's being displaced when the shock's working. It has a really nicely designed piston, and this has a gas pressurized canister in there. So this is nitrogen pressurized, and this will work a lot better and is much easier to set up, because now we can really set up the damping rates to work with our spring. And it's quite obvious that if you have a spring and a damper that will work on a car that weighs 600 kilograms, it will not work the same as a car that weighs 1.6 tons. So it has to work really different. That's why I went with all of the custom suspension setup. Now, because we have a Series 1 Europa, normally we would have a 1.9 inner diameter spring. This is a 2.25 inner diameter spring, so it's a lot wider. Now, the reason that we can do this is because we can mount, and we will have to mount, the damper upside down because it's gas pressurized, and we'll mount it like this in the car. And this will work because if we mount this upside down, the spring will not interfere with the upper wishbone. Even if we wind it down a little bit, this won't matter. The other thing that you see is that we do not have a stud for the anti-roll bar, but that is because we are using an upper mounted anti-roll bar and not mounted underneath. And the reason therefore is because the mounting stud on the shock is the lowest part of a Europa, So we're removing that so that we have a little bit more ground clearance. Going with this shock setup, it took me a little bit of convincing because it really is a lot of money, but this will transform how the car works. This will optimize the already good suspension design of the Europa. So we have a lot of advantages. We have a custom spring setup, so these dampers and springs are designed to work with my car in particular. They are an all aluminium construction, so they will be a lot lighter. In total it will be almost 4 kilograms of unsprung weight that we're actually changing, because we are mounting these upside down. So like this, the only piece of unsprung weight is this section, because the body, which is the heaviest part, is attached to the chassis, so this is sprung weight. So we're gaining a little bit of an advantage there as well. So they are adjustable in damping forces, so I'll be able to dial in the suspension to soft or hard depending on where I'm driving it and what I want to do with the car, what tires I have on there. So that's another big bonus. They are adjustable in ride height, so I can change the look of the car a little bit. On the fronts we have a little bit more leeway on the suspension height than in the rear, and that's because we are using the double spring setup. So we can lower this a little bit, but not too much, but I don't think that that will be a problem. I'm really curious how this will work. The progressive spring setup on the rear is supposed to be a really good upgrade. Simon is used to racing K-trams and setting up K-trams, which have an almost identical suspension setup than Europa, especially the weight and the weight distribution is about the same. So I'm really curious how this will work, but he says that this is maybe the best upgrade you can do to the suspension on a light car like this, and it will give a lot more comfort and control of the rear axle. So now it's time to work on the rest of the car, that I can actually install these, because the more that we're nearing the end of the restoration, the more curious that I am on how the car will drive, and I really can't wait. The restoration has been in progress for more than 8 years at the moment, so I think that while we're nearing the end of the restoration, it's really itching to be able to drive the car. And I hope you will join me on the rest of the restoration, because I'm going to stop here. I hope you enjoyed this short video, and if you have any questions or comments, just post them below, and I hope I see you next time. Goodbye.